brand new Red Bull RB19. You must be exhilarated to see this new car. I'm winding you up, of course. I mean, it's the second time they've done this, right? This is not a new car.
No, it's not a new car. They've done exactly what they did last year, is they produced something that isn't the new car, but actually stood in front of it and told everyone that it was. And Red Bull have got a long history of having some very difficult launches. I've got a whole heap of stories about Red Bull launches over the years. But the fact that they're actually saying that it is the new car when it isn't is just disingenuous, and it's insulting the fans and everyone that's watching. A lot of us know that it's the RB18 that they're in all of these photos. All they need to do, from my point of view, is just say it's a livery launch. This is our new livery. We're not going to show you our new car. I just don't understand why they just can't be open with what's being presented. And it infuriates me. Probably in the grand scheme of things, it's not that important. We were expecting this to happen, but we just see what Red Bull.
So let's on this. This is not the RB19. Can we ask your thoughts again on what you think the RB19 might actually be? Have you heard anything behind the scenes of where they're going?
I've not heard anything reliable. Obviously, lots of people through the winter produce lots of articles in magazines and websites and produce videos saying that it's going to do this, it's going to be that. And it's the same for Red Bull and for Ferrari and for Mercedes. I don't know anything about what the new Red Bull will be. I would imagine it would follow a lot of the philosophies of the RB18. By that, I mean the shape of the underfloor, the amount of ride height that they run, which is more than the other teams, despite the change in regulations. I don't expect them to go away from that philosophy. I think from little snippets we've seen, there's not much changing on the rear suspension, so I wouldn't expect the front would change. I think the most visible thing will be what they do with the side pods, and I think that all I would say is they'll probably just be a lot more sculpted than the RB18. Which is already quite sculpted. And I think a lot of people are going to be probably copying the RB18 on their 2023 cars, but obviously Red Bull are going to jump another step ahead. So I would expect that when we see it, I probably wouldn't be expecting anything too different, anything too exciting. I think there may be a few little clever bits with the shape of the side pods.
And of course, the bits we don't see, and I take on board what you say, the bits we don't see, of course, will be the weight saving on the car, I would guess, would be one of their main areas.
Yeah, absolutely, is weight saving on the car. There weren't any real deficiencies in that car as they went through the season, really. They had porpoising sorted, they had drag versus downforce sorted, they had tyre management sorted, reliability generally was quite good. There's not much wrong that Honda can kind of play about with that on the engine. No doubt they will play the reliability card to make some changes to the power unit and things like that. So I think it's really just going to be refining the concept and taking it, one step on rather than completely reinventing the wheel with the car.
So Scarbs, is it big news from your point of view then that in 2026 Red Bull power units are going to be tied in with Ford? What do you make of that, and how big an involvement does this mean for Ford?
I mean, I think the question is, how big of an involvement will it be for Ford? We've seen that historically they've had different approaches. If you think back to the Cosworth days, they pretty much gave Cosworth the money to go and make the engine. It was a branding exercise. And we saw that to an extent when they were involved with other teams over the years, to a greater or lesser degree. I think probably the last time was with Stewart, where you actually saw the Ford name on there. And it was very much a hands-off, let's let the experts run the team, and we'll have the marketing people and the branding people do their work, but a lot less technical crossover. It was only when it went from Stewart to being Jaguar that lots of Ford executives and engineers suddenly got involved in the operation, and historically that didn't go very well. It's so often the case is that if you try and get a corporate company to run a Formula One team, it ends in disaster. And you can look at that with Honda's direct involvement with their team, with Toyota, for example, obviously Ford. And then you look at the people that have been successful, which have been people like, you could argue, BMW. Mercedes is probably the classic example. As much as that's a Mercedes team, it's very much a small Formula One team running the operation. And it isn't lots of Mercedes executives and Mercedes engineers trying to put their oar into it, trying to make it work the Mercedes way. And it's very much run both at Brackley and at Brixworth as small, agile engineering companies, which is what you need to do to run a Formula One team. So then the question would be, is what are Ford going to be doing with Red Bull? Now, we've seen Red Bull work really well with someone like Honda recently, perhaps less so more previously with Renault, but they did actually work that situation out eventually. So I would expect it's much more going to be the marketing and the branding aspect involved. Red Bull have set up Red Bull powertrains at their base at Milton Keynes. They've hired lots of people from within the sport and within, you know, the surrounding engineering industries. They don't need Ford to come in and design an engine for them. They don't need Ford to come in and offer them technology. They've got that themselves. What they need is arguably Ford's money and the marketing aspect. I'm sure there will be some technical crossover, and I'm sure Ford will make some, you know, some stories about how that they've helped them with like the MG UKs and the electrification of the Formula One engine. But I think largely this should be, you know, Ford's name on the engine cover and on the valve covers, but not Ford delving too deeply trying to build their own Formula One engine. And I think Red Bull are smart enough to recognize that. They've clearly pushed away Porsche, which was one of the things we were really expecting to happen. They just didn't think the DNA was right. And I don't think they would make this, you know, a mistake by engaging someone like Ford in a bad way.
And you hit the nail on the head, I think, with the money with Ford, because the one thing Porsche were never going to do is put money into that program. And I suspect that was ultimately what was the problem there. But what is going on at Honda? I mean, 1 minute they're in, then they're out, then they're badging, and now they're doing another engine again. Talk about inconsistency.
It is. And I think Honda is reacting to the situations as they came along. So, you know, they decided that, you know, with the way the world was, is not to invest huge amounts of money into Formula One. And they pulled out from Red Bull as a powertrain supplier. But then, you know,
Well,
Red
let's
Bull were
go
in a
back
difficult
even further.
situation.
Go back to the Ross Brawn days and Honda pulling
Yeah,
out then. You know, I mean, talk about pulling the plug then, and they did. Obviously, they
they
left
did.
Ross a lot of money,
And,
which was
you know,
nice. And then there's the
yeah,
pulling out from Red Bull. Then they sort of came back in a little bit with sponsorship at the Japanese Grand Prix last year. And now they're doing their own engine again for 2026.
well, exactly. And I think Honda, as I say, just reacted to what's going on. You know, they've rejoined effectively Formula One at the moment with Red Bull. Their name is all over the car, although it's formerly a Red Bull powertrain. It is the Honda powertrain supported by Honda engineers. And that will cease to be a relationship and a situation at the end of 2025 when the regulations change. However, Honda have always been open that they are developing a 2026 power unit, and it's quite different regulations. It just means that it won't be, as far as we can see at the moment, with Red Bull Racing. Now, whether that means Red Bull Racing will continue with AlphaTauri as a kind of a pair and have the same powertrain, which seems to make lots and lots of sense. So I wouldn't expect we would have a AlphaTauri Honda and a Red Bull Ford. So Honda now need to decide, what are they going to do? Who could they partner with? And if not, do they go and make their own team? Are they one of these two teams that the FIA say that there are space to allow into Formula One? What's interesting is that today the FIA have announced that the powertrain suppliers for 2026 and GM, who was supposed to be Andretti's entry powertrain supplier, aren't on that list. Honda are. So who do Honda go with? Do they go with Penske, who have already said that they're tied into GMM, so that doesn't seem to make any sense. And what good teams are left to partner with? And if you kind of go through the list, you think, you know, the top teams are all covered. Alpine, well, they won't need a powertrain. They are a powertrain company through the Renault deal that they still have. McLaren, I think there's enough bad blood there to think that neither of them would want to go into the engine partnership again after the debacle of a few years ago. And by then you're into the bottom half of the grid. So yeah, who are Honda going to partner with? And are they going to go in as a full entry again, which would be incredibly bold, in my opinion, would be a mistake, judged on previous history and where the sport is at the moment. So yeah, the Honda situation is confusing.
Well, it is, and no surprise that the FIA have said ultimately the teams need to sanction, the existing teams need to sanction the new teams, and that's inevitably going to be putting the kibosh on everything, because none of the existing teams are going to want to have a smaller slice of the cake, and we all know, you know, what's going to happen as a result, and that's, I suspect, why the whole Michael Andretti thing is still stalling as it is. I suppose from Michael's point of view now, he could go to Honda and say, you know, here's a serious proposition, big American market, American races, Formula One.
Yeah.
That's a possibility, I guess. But given the FIA's response to the General Motors Cadillac thing, which was very positive, you would imagine that was going to be some sort of Trojan horse that enabled Michael to come in that way. But again, the teams seem to have said, we're not interested. And that's a sad thing, I believe, because the next generation is important and expanding the grid is important.
Expanding the grid is very important. You know, I'm always a little wary of manufacturers coming into the sport, because as you see with Honda and BMW and Toyota and so many before, they're happy just to pull out when it suits their business needs. But I don't think it should be down to the teams to decide who comes into the sport.
No.
I mean, that wouldn't happen in any other category. The golfers go, well, no, he can't come in, or football teams going, you know, Accrington Stanley can't be promoted this year. It's, you know, it's the wrong way of running a sport. And so often, you know, Formula One teams have had the power in decision making, and I think this is a situation where very much they shouldn't be making the decisions. The FIA, from the requirement list that you probably saw published this week about what a Formula One team or a new entrant would have to present to the FIA, if someone's presented all of them in a positive way, all of those questions and all those requirements, then they should be allowed in. If they're putting the budget down and they prove that they've got the money for enough years, why not? Because we haven't had that level of rigor previously. So if you look at some of the most recent teams, obviously the most recent being Haas, who have been somewhat of a success, albeit strapped through sponsorship. But before that, you had the three 2010 teams who came in on what was supposed to be a budget capped formula. But
tell me about
all
it.
of them failed. Yeah, and there was a fourth, if I seem to remember. And you know, they all
would have
failed.
been the best team.
Oh, quite possibly. Who knows? But yeah.
No, but Scabs, what it comes down to, of course, and you know, this is the reality of it, that if there is a team out there that can tick all those boxes, a new team with that amount of money, then an AlphaTauri or a Gene Haas or a Williams are going to want to be bought out, and they want that money themselves. They don't want that new team coming in and spending that money. That's what it's all about. And that's why these teams have got a stranglehold on it. You know, if you want to come in and you've got that amount of money, you can buy my team. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And again, I don't think that's the right way of running a sport.
No, it isn't. But I mean, sadly, now, in a way, sadly, you know, the whole Audi Sauber thing, that the teams are going to use the Audi thing as a template for the way the manufacturers should, you know, should behave, and that's going to be the new standard, I think. Scabs, I won't keep you, but we've got a busy week next week. I'm just wondering which real launch next week are you most looking forward to?
Let's see. So we've got a few ones where we're not quite sure what we're going to see. Williams is definitely a livery launch. Alfa Romeo, I'm expecting to see a real car. They've been generally quite honest and upfront. Even if it's a 3D render, it tends to be fairly accurate. That'd be quite interesting. I think you've got the big two, Mercedes and Ferrari, are the ones that I'm really looking for. Now, we know that Mercedes quite often will launch the car, the true car, but make bodywork changes partway through testing or before the first race. I haven't really got the time to do that this year. We're just 3 days of testing before going straight into the race, but that should be interesting. And Ferrari, who have historically always produced the photos of the real car, that doesn't change massively over the first few races. So I think really the Ferrari is the one that I think is the real litmus test to see what they've got. But I am interested to see which direction Mercedes are going again, because of so many rumours, mostly unfounded ones, I think, to guess, or wishful ones about what are they going to do with the side pods and the ride height and stuff. I think we won't see the true solution, but I think we'll see some of the steps towards that. And I think the language that will come out of Mercedes will be quite interesting this year.
Well, we'll see you next week. Looking forward to going through those with you. Thanks for your time now.
Yes.
See you soon.
Yeah, thanks, Peter.